The janitor tiptoed into the CEO's office, mop in hand, careful not to wake the man slumped in his leather chair. What he didn't know was that the CEO was wide awake, secretly watching, judging. But when the janitor paused, leaned in, and whispered 7 quiet words, the CEO's eyes shot open, and everything changed. Victor Langston wasn't asleep, not really. He slouched in his grand leather chair, eyes barely closed, chest rising in the simulated rhythm of someone deep in thought, or pretending to nap. The blinds were partially open, casting long, golden shadows across the sleek mahogany desk. Outside, the lights of the city flickered like ghosts in glass towers. Inside, silence ruled, except for the distant hum of a vacuum cleaner echoing down the hallway. He'd stayed late on purpose. Not to finish a deal, not even to rest. This was a test. His company, once a startup fueled by fire and vision, had grown into an empire. He built it claw by claw, brick by brick. But these days, Victor believed something different was spreading through the hallways. A kind of rot, entitlement, apathy. He wanted to know who still cared, who did more than just show up. So tonight, he stayed behind. And now, like a lion in tall grass, he waited. Footsteps. The janitor entered quietly, pushing a worn yellow cart. 40s maybe, tired eyes, brown gloves stained with bleach and hard work. His name tag read Lewis. Victor had seen him in passing maybe twice, always at night, head down, never speaking unless spoken to. The kind of man no one noticed until the floors weren't clean. Victor stayed still as Lewis maneuvered with near reverence. The man's movements were deliberate, careful, like someone entering a cathedral. He picked up an empty coffee cup left behind, wiped down the desk corner, adjusted a crooked frame on the bookshelf. And then something strange. Lewis looked at Victor, actually looked. His face softened. A long second passed. Victor's heart beat faster. What's he doing? Then quietly, almost beneath breath, Lewis leaned forward toward the chair and whispered, "Your son would be proud if he knew how many lives you saved by building this." It was suddenly hard to pretend. Victor's body flinched, but he kept still. His mind raced. How did he know? The mop swish resumed. In moments, the janitor was gone. Victor sat frozen, the silence now deafening. He had tried to test someone, but it was *he* who had been undone. If this moment stirred something in you, don't scroll past it. Share this story with someone who might need to be reminded that even the quietest people carry the loudest truths. And subscribe if you believe kindness changes everything. 2 men walked the same hallways every day, but they lived in entirely different worlds. On the top floor, Victor Langston sat surrounded by brushed steel, soft leather, and silence punctuated only by the buzz of strategic meetings and distant boardroom echoes. Every decision he made rippled across dozens of departments. He wore perfectly tailored suits, drank $40 single-origin coffee, and signed deals with a flick of his pen that altered the futures of hundreds. He was known in the industry as a builder, a strategist, a man who rose from nothing and now believed only in results. 5 floors below, Luis Ramirez pushed a janitor's cart past rows of unlit cubicles. The hall lights flickered slightly, casting shifting shadows as he moved through them. He wore the same faded uniform every night, washed and pressed with effort, not luxury. His fingers were rough, nails cracked from chemicals and cold water. No headlines would bear his name. There were no meetings to attend, no assistants to schedule his time. Just him, the floors, the silence. Lewis had been with the company for 7 years. He never missed a shift, though sometimes he arrived late, apologetic but worn. A quiet man whose eyes carried more weight than his words ever could. Few employees knew anything about him at all. Some nodded in greeting. Many simply walked past. Victor, though he would never say so out loud, often believed people like Lewis were replaceable. Good intentions didn't balance the books. Heart didn't add to shareholder value. That's why, when the board began proposing budget cuts, janitorial services were at the top of the list. Outsource it, automate it, cut costs. No one would notice. But Victor, ever the numbers man, wanted data, and he also wanted something more. He wanted proof that loyalty still existed, that someone out there still took pride in their work for its own sake. That's how the strange test was born. He'd observe, without interference, how they acted when no one watched. He needed to see who gave more than they were paid for. And now, after tonight's whisper, Victor didn't know what he believed anymore. Two men, one building. One mission built on power, the other on love. And somewhere in between, a truth waiting to rise. People may work behind the scenes, unnoticed and uncelebrated, but that doesn't mean they don't matter. If you've ever met someone who gives quietly, completely, share this with them. And if you haven't, maybe you just haven't looked closely enough. The memo came down from the board late Thursday afternoon, worded with polite urgency but sharpened with corporate precision. Explore operational cutbacks in all auxiliary departments, facilities, maintenance, night staff. Victor Langston read it twice before he set it down. He didn't recoil. This wasn't new. As companies grew, their margins thinned and their heartbeats faded. First to go were usually the people who didn't have voices in the room. But Victor remembered what it was like to sweep his own floor. Before the corner office, he was the man that fixed broken printers, mopped up coffee spills when the cleaning crews missed a spot. Maybe that's why something inside him hadn't fully bought into the outsourcing idea yet. Still, the pressure from investors was real. The board wanted numbers, efficiency, AI projections. Facility costs could be cut by 40% with minimal disruption. He stared at the data. They painted a clean story. But Victor knew stories didn't live in spreadsheets. They lived in people. He called HR and posed a question. Who's your best night shift janitor? The director hesitated. Probably Luis Ramirez, never calls out. Quiet, polite, custodians like him. Victor scribbled the name. Don't tell him anything. I just want to observe. The HR rep raised an eyebrow, though Victor couldn't see it. Sir, may I ask why? Victor's response was cold, clipped. Because people show their real loyalty when they think no one's watching. I want to test that. He didn't mean cruelty, just clarity. He wanted to know, does this man actually care, or is he just clocking in and counting down? That night, Victor decided he'd stay late, told his assistant to cancel everything after 6. At 10:47 p.m., he shut off his phone, dimmed the lights, and reclined in his chair like a statue. Waiting, listening. Luis didn't know anything was different. He arrived, tired but working, the way he always did. And Victor observed, but was not ready for what would come next. This wasn't just about cost-cutting now. It had become something more than a corporate decision. It had become personal. Sometimes the biggest things in life appear beneath the smallest questions, like whether a man cleans a corner no one sees, or whether a CEO still believes people care without asking for something in return. If this story is making you feel something, follow it, share it. Let someone know their quiet work speaks louder than they think. Luis Ramirez moved through life with the quiet determination of a man who had no one to fall back on and no time to complain. By day, he was a caretaker, nurse, teacher, and comforter to his 8-year-old son, Mateo. By night, he was a janitor in a city where people barely made eye contact with him. But every shift, he showed up. Worn boots, second-hand gloves, and eyes that looked more tired than his body ever admitted. Mateo's illness was the kind of cruel that didn't announce itself loudly. A rare blood disorder, manageable but expensive. The treatments weren't covered fully by his meager insurance. Every month was a tightrope walk between prescriptions, rent, and gas money. Luis picked up extra shifts whenever he could, sold his old TV, stopped going out, not that he had much time for that anymore. He even washed and reused old plastic lunch bags to save a few extra cents. Yet somehow, he managed to keep joy alive for Mateo. Homemade paper toys, silly accents at bedtime, a smile that never cracked in front of him. Most nights before leaving for work, Luis would tiptoe into Mateo's room, brush the boy's curls back, and whisper, "You're my whole world, Mijo." And Mateo, bright-eyed and observant, knew they didn't have much, but he saw how hard his father tried. "Why do you always smile, even when you're tired?" he asked one morning as Luis tucked him in before his shift. Luis chuckled softly. "Because when you smile back, it's like I forget I'm tired." Walking into work that night, Luis wasn't thinking about being watched or rated. He was thinking about getting home in time to make breakfast for his son. He thought about stretching rent until next payday. He thought about how tired his legs were. But still, when he saw a stray crumpled paper under an executive's desk, he reached for it. When he passed a crooked painting in the hall, he straightened it. Not because anyone would notice, but because he would. To Luis, this job, this building, wasn't just floors and routines. It was the vehicle keeping his son alive. A blessing, a burden, a strange blend of both. Not once did he imagine that someone upstairs was watching, wondering, waiting. Not once did he think his small kindnesses mattered outside his own world. But they did, more than he could possibly have imagined. If Luis reminds you of someone, a parent, a guardian, or a quiet fighter, share this moment with them. Let's keep reminding the world that real strength doesn't shout, it whispers. Rain tapped gently against the windows of the executive floor that night, soft and rhythmic, like a lullaby most people never heard because they'd already gone home. But Luis Ramirez had just arrived, shaking off the chill from his jacket and rolling up his sleeves. His son had spiked a mild fever earlier, and though Luis had thought about calling out, he couldn't afford to miss another shift. He kissed Mateo's forehead, whispered a silent prayer, and came in anyway. It was nearly 11 p.m. when he pushed his cart onto the top floor, the office no janitor ever really liked to clean. Not because it was dirty, but because of the silence. It was too perfect, too still, and the air always seemed heavier up there. But Luis treated every floor the same, respectfully, quietly, thoroughly. He didn't notice right away that Victor Langston was in his chair. The lights were low, and the CEO was reclined just enough to look asleep. His face was calm, his breathing slow. Luis hesitated at the doorway. Should he continue? Should he come back? But he had a tight schedule, and the floors wouldn't clean themselves. He moved slowly, tiptoeing into the office with deliberate care. The mop didn't slap against the floor, it glided. Each movement was quiet, gentle, respectful. The kind of respect rarely given to a man who was, in everyone else's eyes, just the janitor. Luis picked up an empty coffee cup from the desk and noticed a picture frame had fallen slightly sideways. He reached out and adjusted it. It was a photo of a young man, mid-20s, same intense eyes as the CEO, laughing beside a sailboat. There was dust on it. He picked up a cloth and lightly wiped it clean. Then, something personal caught his eye, a jacket sticking out from a drawer, tags frayed, like it hadn't been worn in years. He gently brushed the lint from the shoulder before tucking it back in. And then, he did something unexpected. He looked at Victor, still sleeping. Luis tilted his head like he saw something others hadn't. In that moment, Victor didn't look rich or powerful. He looked tired, human. Luis leaned in and whispered, not for attention, not for praise, just because it was in his heart. Your son would be proud if he knew how many lives you saved by building this. Then he picked up his mop and quietly walked out. Victor's eyes flew open. He couldn't breathe. What had that man just said? If you've ever witnessed quiet grace in an unexpected moment, share this story. Sometimes the most powerful voices come from those who never raise theirs. Victor Langston sat frozen in the darkness of his office long after Luis's footsteps had disappeared down the hallway. The whisper echoed in his mind, circling over and over like it had been spoken directly into his soul. Your son would be proud if he knew how many lives you saved by building this. He hadn't heard his son mentioned aloud in years. Victor slowly stood, his legs unsteady. He wasn't sure what moved him more, the truth in the words, or the fact that someone who barely knew him had seen past the armor he'd worn for a decade. He walked to the restroom, splashed cold water on his face, and stared into the mirror. For a brief second, he didn't see the powerful CEO. He saw the grieving father who stood beside a fresh grave 10 years ago, fists clenched, jaw tight, unable to weep. That day, he had made a choice: to protect himself by building higher walls and pouring his guilt into work. His son, Michael, had died in an accident on a rainy night much like this one: a drunk driver, a speeding car, a phone call that shattered everything. Michael had been just 26, full of ideas, full of dreams, had told Victor days before that he wanted to volunteer abroad and make something of his life, asterisk on his own terms, not in his father's shadow. They never had that follow-up conversation. There was never time. Business got in the way, deadlines, earnings reports. Victor had missed his last chance to listen. Since then, he disguised his grief in productivity. He became known as the machine, the untouchable executive with no time for birthdays, no patience for excuses. The pain hadn't gone away. He had just buried it under operations and quarterly goals. Until tonight. Lewis's words had reached a place no board member, investor, or therapist ever had. It wasn't just the words, it was the honesty behind them, the understanding, the empathy. Victor ran a company of over 4,000 employees. Yet somehow, the clearest, truest perspective had come not from a clinking glass in a boardroom, but from a janitor with worn shoes and tired hands. Who was this man? Why did he know what to say? One whisper had cracked 10 years of silence. And Victor wasn't sure yet what it meant, only that something had shifted. If you believe that compassion can cross any barrier, status, wealth, title, share this moment. Because sometimes healing doesn't come from someone above you. Sometimes it comes from someone who's been walking quietly beside you all along. Monday morning arrived with the usual haste, suits brushing past one another, elevators dinging non-stop, coffee brewing in every corner. But something about the air in the building felt different, charged, as if something unspoken was about to be revealed. The inboxes of every department buzzed with an unexpected email from executive administration. All staff, mandatory meeting at 10:00 a.m. in the main auditorium. Attendance required. No agenda shared. Whispers immediately followed. Layoffs, a merger, restructuring. Luis Ramirez had just finished his last shift. He didn't plan to attend. Night crew was rarely included in daytime meetings. Besides, he was exhausted and needed to get home before Mateo's school nurse called again. As he emptied the last trash can, a young HR intern rushed in. "Mr. Ramirez, they asked for you at the auditorium." Luis blinked, confused. "Are you sure?" "Very." Across the building, employees gathered, murmuring anxiously. Victor Langston hadn't spoken to the entire staff in over 3 years. When he finally stepped onto the stage, the room fell instantly silent. No assistant, no marketing team, no cue cards. Just Victor with a distant look in his eyes and a paper in his hand that he barely looked at. "Last week," he began slowly, "I stayed late in this building to test something. Loyalty, integrity. I wanted to know if our foundation was still built on people who care, not just perform. What I didn't expect was to be humbled." He turned toward the side doors of the room. In walked Luis, in his uniform, hands still slightly dusted with cleaner. Victor motioned him forward. This man, he continued, voice softer now, didn't know he was being watched. He didn't know he was in a test, but he passed something far greater. He reminded me of why I ever built this company in the first place. Not for money, not for power, but for people. Victor paused. "Louis, your whisper changed me, and I want everyone in this room to know that mattered." He looked out over the room. Effective immediately, Louis and his son will have full medical coverage, not as charity, as recognition. A beat, then applause. It started slow, unsure, but grew into something thunderous. Louis stood frozen, overwhelmed, a quiet tear slipping down his face. Across the room, people who had never noticed him before were now looking, truly looking. Not at a janitor. At a man who reminded them what character looks like when no one's watching. If this moment moved you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it. We need more reminders that the size of someone's paycheck has nothing to do with the depth of their integrity. The following weeks felt like something had cracked open in the company, not in a chaotic way, but like sunlight breaking through a window that had been shut too long. Louis still arrived for his night shifts, mop in hand, but something had shifted. Not in him, but around him. People greeted him now, by name, with eye contact, with respect. But the most surprising change came from Victor himself. Late one afternoon, Louis was asked to come to the executive floor, not to clean, but to meet. He ascended the same elevator he always had, but this time he wasn't carrying a cart. He didn't know what to expect. The doors opened, and Victor stood waiting, not in a suit, but in a sweater, sleeves rolled, eyes soft. "Come in," he said simply. The office felt less like a fortress now, more like a room with a man inside it. Victor handed Louis a folder. "This is unconventional," he said with a faint smile, "but I want you to accept a new position here, employee care liaison." Louis blinked unsure. "I don't know what that means." "It means I want someone in this building who sees people, not just performance, who can remind us what matters when we start to forget. Someone who listens, someone grounded." Louis looked down at his shoes, then back at the man in front of him. "I'm not qualified." "You're more than qualified," Victor said, "because you never stopped being human in a place that sometimes forgets how to be." The promotion came with better pay, flexible hours, full health care. But Louis didn't let it change who he was. On more than one night, he still rolled up his sleeves to help the night crew mop. Not for show, just because that part of him had never been about a job title. When he brought Matteo to visit the office a week later, Victor knelt to greet the boy at eye level. "Your dad," he said, "teaches me something every day." Matteo grinned. "He teaches me stuff too." Victor laughed, but it was a real laugh, not the polished kind. The kind that made it clear, for once, he wasn't thinking about profits, expansions, or shareholder calls. Just a moment, just a connection. And that's what Louis had always represented. The kind of quiet, consistent integrity that doesn't need an audience to shine. If you've been inspired by this journey, take a moment now to look a little closer at the people we often overlook. Share their stories. Celebrate their character. And remember, sometimes the people who keep everything running are also the ones quietly holding the whole world together. 1 year later, the company didn't just feel different, it was different. It showed in the way people talked to one another, in the way executives made time to walk through departments they once ignored, and especially in the way employees showed up not just asterisk for asterisk work, but as asterisk themselves. Louis now had an office with a window, a desk with his name on it, and a badge that read Employee Care Liaison. He didn't care much for titles, but he cared deeply for what they allowed him to do. His job wasn't about policies or enforcement, it was about listening. He shared coffee breaks with employees in all departments, quietly jotting down their concerns, their dreams, and sometimes their pain. When people were going through silent battles, he noticed. And now, finally, someone had the power to do something about it. But Louis had kept one quiet tradition alive. Every Friday night, just before midnight, he would head up to the top floor, not in uniform anymore, and walk the hallways. No clipboard, no mop, just a moment of stillness. A reminder of where he came from, where everything started. One particular Friday, as he passed the corner office, he spotted something surprising. Victor Langston, motionless in his chair, eyes closed. A familiar scene. Louis smiled, almost amused. Was the CEO pulling another pretend nap? But he noticed someone else entering the office. A new janitor, young, nervous, first week on the job. Louis stopped outside the doorway, not to interfere, but to watch. The janitor tiptoed in, mop in hand, and paused at the sight of Victor. He looked unsure but respectful. Then he stepped closer. The mop rested on the wall. The young man leaned in. A whisper, too soft to hear. Victor's eyes opened immediately. He turned his head slowly and gave a faint, knowing smile. Not startled this time, not defensive, just present. Louis quietly walked away, heart full. It had come full circle. It wasn't about tests anymore. It was about trust. One small act of sincerity had rippled into something bigger than any of them expected. The kind of ripple that becomes a wave, the kind that changes a culture, a business, a life. If this story moved something inside you, pay attention to those small ripples around you. Share this with someone who quietly gives without being asked. And remember, empathy may whisper, but its echo can change everything. Sometimes the tiniest moments are the ones that stay with us forever. A whisper in a dark room, a quiet act of care when no one's watching, a single sentence that reaches a broken place in someone's heart and helps it beat again. Louis never set out to change anyone's life. He just showed up, day after day, doing what had to be done, with pride, with respect, and with love for someone waiting at home. And in doing so, he reminded a powerful man who had everything, but had forgotten what it was all for, how to feel again. Victor Langston didn't become a different person overnight. Grief doesn't leave that quickly, but he became softer at the edges. He started attending birthday lunches. He stepped into departments without a notepad just to ask, "How are you?" He wrote personal notes to night crew staff, not because of a PR campaign, but because he was healing, too. He and Louis never talked much about that night. It didn't need retelling. What mattered was how it shaped what came next. The mentorship program Louis helped launch became a pillar inside the company, pairing entry-level workers with experienced staff, creating real pathways for growth. Turnover dropped, engagement soared, but beyond strategy and statistics, something else had taken root: culture, humanity, a heartbeat. Louis still never wanted the spotlight. When journalists asked him for interviews, he'd politely decline. "It wasn't me," he'd say. "It was just a moment, a needed one." But those who knew the real story understood. The heartbeat of this company had been restored not by a bold move in a boardroom, but by a whisper from a janitor who saw a man inside a sleeping giant. And maybe that's the real message. The world often trains us to look up, to chase titles, to admire the corner offices, to notice only the loud, the fast, the grand. But sometimes, the most defining acts are quiet, done in shadows, with no guarantee of reward. What we do when no one is watching is who we truly are. So take a moment today to look around you. Not just at who leads, but who serves. Not just who speaks loudest, but who listens hardest. Share this story with someone who moves through the world with humility and heart. And if you've ever felt unseen, remember, one whisper of truth, one act of quiet empathy can echo louder than 1,000 speeches. Sometimes, it only takes one person to remind the world how to feel again.